a terrible scene, the worst I've ever seen in my life.
She fought like a real hero for her kids.
They were doing their homework when they got murdered.
They were stacked on top of one another, and the tub was full of water.
You can't drown children while you stare into their gasping faces without being the devil.
Breaking news out of northern Florida. A mother and her young children were found killed at a violent crime scene. Now homicide detectives are looking for whoever might have had a reason to harm them. Tallahassee police say the four were murdered at a home on Saddle Creek Run Road. Police say the children are 6-year-old twins and a 3-year-old boy. They have not released any information on who they are or how they died, but they say they are actively searching the area. The home is just a few miles from the campuses of Florida State University and Florida A&M University.
The autumn air in Tallahassee carried the familiar scent of fallen leaves and the distant cheers from Florida State University's campus. It was November 20th, 2010, and families across the quiet Saddle Creek Run neighborhood were settling into their Saturday evening routines. Children finished homework, parents prepared dinner, and the world felt safe behind locked doors. But in one small house, with a porch light flickered against the growing darkness, something unspeakable had already happened. When the silence became too heavy to bear, when unanswered phone calls turned from worry to panic, a neighbor's trembling voice would break through the evening calm with words that would forever change how this community understood evil. The call came at dusk. Something's wrong at the Peters house. Nobody's answering, and Brandy always answers her phone. What police discovered when they stepped through that front door will be described by one veteran detective as the worst scene he had witnessed in 25 years of law enforcement. Blood painted the walls like abstract art drawn by madness itself. The house screamed of violence so raw, so uncontrolled, that even hardened investigators would later seek counseling to process what they had seen. But before we journey into that house of horrors, before we confront the darkness that consumed an entire family, let us first remember them as they lived, breathed, and loved. Brandy Peters entered this world on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1983, in the small town of Bainbridge, Georgia. Born into love on the day dedicated to it, she carried that warmth throughout her 27 years of life. The youngest of 8 children, Brandy grew up in a household where laughter echoed through cramped rooms and where her mother's hands worked magic with hair and hearts alike. Those same gifted hands would one day belong to Brandy, who inherited not just her mother's talent for styling hair, but her ability to make everyone feel beautiful, wanted, cherished. Friends would later describe sitting in Brandy's kitchen while she worked her fingers through their hair, transforming not just their appearance but their confidence. She had a gift for seeing beauty where others saw flaws, for finding light in the darkest of circumstances. When Brandy's family moved to Tallahassee during her teenage years, she quickly adapted to life in the college town. At Godby High School, she was known for her infectious smile and her fierce loyalty to those she loved. Her classmates remember a young woman who could light up a room, but who also possessed an inner strength that seemed almost protective, as if she sensed early on that life would demand everything from her. In 2003, when Brandy was just 20 years old, her world expanded in the most beautiful and challenging way possible. She discovered she was carrying twins, 2 little hearts beating inside her, 2 futures depending entirely on her strength. The father, Antonio, would soon be removed from their lives by the justice system, leaving Brandy to face the terrifying and wonderful prospect of raising 2 babies alone. But Brandy Peters was not easily broken. With her mother and sister Monica flanking her like guardian angels, she prepared for motherhood with the same determination that had carried her through every challenge before. When Tamaya and Tanaya entered the world, they found themselves wrapped not just in soft blankets, but in the fierce love of a mother who would move mountains to protect them. The twins were everything to Brandy. Friends described watching her face transform when she spoke about her daughters, how her voice would soften and her eyes would shine with pride. Tamaya, with her quiet wisdom that seemed ancient in such a small body, and Tanaya, whose laughter could chase away the darkest clouds, became the center of Brandy's universe. She built her life around them, scheduling her hair appointments around school pickup times, saving every penny to buy them the little luxuries that made childhood magical. In 2007, love found Brandy again in the form of Henry Segura, a welder whose strong hands could shape metal but whose heart, Brandy believed, could be shaped by love. Their relationship brought new life into the world when their son Giovanni was born, a beautiful boy with his mother's eyes, and what everyone hoped would be his father's strength. The small house on Saddle Creek Run became their sanctuary. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, just another modest home in a neighborhood where dreams were built on hope and hard work. But inside those walls, Brandy created something precious, a home where children felt safe, where homework was done at the kitchen table, where bedtime stories were told with voices full of wonder. Neighbors remembered the sound of children's laughter drifting from the backyard, the sight of Brandy hanging laundry on the line while her 3 babies played at her feet. It was a scene of such ordinary beauty that its destruction would seem not just tragic, but impossible. But beneath the surface of the seemingly perfect life, darkness was gathering like storm clouds on a summer day. Henry Segura, the man who had helped create this family, was slowly becoming its greatest threat. The relationship between Brandy and Henry had never been simple. Henry was married when they met, a fact that complicated everything from the beginning. While some might judge Brandy for loving a married man, those who knew her understood that the heart doesn't always choose the simplest path. She loved Henry, and she believed he loved her and their son in return. But love and responsibility are not always the same thing. As the months passed after Giovante's birth, Henry's financial support became sporadic, then rare, then non-existent. The court system stepped in, ordering him to pay child support, but orders on paper mean nothing to a man determined to avoid his obligations. $20,000. That's what Henry owed Brandy by November of 2010. $20,000 in missed payments for diapers and formula, for doctor visits and clothing, for all the small necessities that add up to the enormous cost of raising a child. To Henry, it was a debt he wanted to escape. To Brandy, it was money her son needed to survive. Friends would later testify that Brandy had begun pressing Henry more aggressively about the payments in the weeks before her death. She was tired of making excuses to Giovante about why other children had things he couldn't have. She was exhausted from working double shifts, doing hair to make up for the money that should have been coming from his father. The last time anyone spoke to Brandy was Friday evening, November 19th, 2010. Her cousin Janet, the woman who had been like a sister to her throughout life, called to confirm plans for their Thanksgiving trip to Tampa. Brandy's voice was bright with anticipation as she talked about getting away with the children, about creating new memories in a new place. "We're going to have such a good time," Brandy told Janet, her voice carrying the smile that everyone who loved her knew so well. "The kids are so excited. Tamaya has been packing and repacking her little suitcase for 3 days." Those were among the last words Brandy Peters would ever speak to someone who loved her. What happened in the hours that followed remains partially shrouded in darkness, but the evidence tells a story of horror that defies comprehension. Sometime on that Saturday evening, as Brandy helped her children with their homework and prepared them for bed, evil walked through her front door. The children were in their pajamas when death came calling. Their homework lay scattered across the kitchen table, math problems and spelling words that would never be completed. It was a kind of peaceful Saturday evening that families across America experience every week. The kind of ordinary moment that we take for granted until it's stolen forever. When Henry Segura entered that house, he brought with him not just violence, but a coldness that allowed him to look into the faces of children and see obstacles rather than innocence. The prosecution would later argue that his plan was simple in its brutality: eliminate Brandy to escape his child support obligations, kill Giovante so there would be no child left to support, and silence any witnesses to his crimes. But the twins were supposed to be at their grandmother's house that evening. Their presence complicated Henry's plan, but didn't deter him. In his mind, they had simply become additional problems to be solved. The evidence suggests that Brandy fought like a lioness protecting her cubs. Blood trails throughout the house told the story of her desperate struggle, of her attempts to reach the door, to escape, to get help for her children. She almost made it. The evidence showed she was just feet from the front door when Henry dragged her back inside and ended her life with brutal efficiency. But the true horror was still to come. After murdering Brandy with multiple gunshot wounds and savage blows from a blunt object, Henry turned his attention to the children. 6-year-old Tamaya, one of the twins who had brought such joy to her mother's life, was shot like her mother. But for the others, Henry chose a method so cruel that it haunts everyone who worked the case. Javante, his own 3-year-old son, was drowned in the bathtub. Tamaya's twin sister, met the same fate. The medical examiner would later testify that drowning is not a quick death, that these children would have struggled, would have looked up at the face of their killer and seen no mercy, no recognition of their humanity. Then, in an act that spoke to a level of depravity that defies understanding, Henry placed Tamaya's body in the bathtub with her siblings, arranging them as if they were sleeping peacefully together. It was a final insult to the love that had bound this family together in life. The phone cord was ripped from the wall, its wires severed to ensure that no calls for help could be made. Every detail suggested careful planning, a methodical approach to murder that spoke to premeditation rather than passion. When police arrived for the welfare check requested by worried family members, they found the front door locked. Inside, the house was silent except for the steady drip of water from the bathroom faucet, a sound that would later haunt the first responders who heard it. Detective Sarah Morrison, a 20-year veteran of the Tallahassee Police Department, was the first to enter the master bedroom where Brandy's body lay. Later, she would tell colleagues that she had to step outside and compose herself before continuing the investigation. "I've seen a lot of terrible things," she said, "but this was different. This was evil." The discovery of the children in the bathroom broke hardened officers who thought they had seen everything. Lieutenant James Rodriguez, who had worked homicides for 15 years, openly wept when he saw the 3 small bodies in the bathtub. "They looked so peaceful," he later testified, "like they were just taking a bath together. But the water was so cold." As news of the murder spread through Tallahassee, the community reacted with a mixture of horror and disbelief. This was the kind of crime that happened in other places, to other families. The idea that someone could murder 3 children, including his own son, challenged everything people believed about the bonds of family and the protection that should surround the innocent. Vigils were held throughout the city. Flowers piled up in front of the Saddle Creek Run House until the entire front yard was carpeted in roses, lilies, and teddy bears left by strangers who felt compelled to honor the memory of a family they had never met. The Twins Elementary School held a memorial service where teachers struggled to explain to 6-year-olds why Tamaya and Tanaya would never return to their desks. Meanwhile, investigators began the painstaking process of building a case. The crime scene yielded a wealth of evidence, but also raised troubling questions. Why was there no sign of forced entry? How had the killer gained access to the house so easily? The answers to these questions would lead them straight to Henry Segura. Initially, Henry appeared to be a cooperative witness. He willingly came in for questioning, expressed appropriate shock and grief at the news of the murders, and seemed eager to help police find the killer. He had an alibi. He claimed to be at home with his wife at the time of the murders, and his cell phone records seemed to support this story. But experienced detectives know that the most dangerous killers are often the most charming, the most helpful, the most eager to assist in the investigation. As they dug deeper into Henry's story, cracks began to appear. The scratches on his hands, which he claimed came from a fight days earlier, were suspicious. His nervousness when asked about his relationship with Brandy suggested there was more to the story than he was telling. Most importantly, investigators discovered that Henry had a second cell phone, one he had conveniently forgotten to mention during his initial interview. The GPS data from that hidden phone told a very different story than Henry's alibi. It placed him at Brandy's house on the day of the murders, destroying his carefully constructed story and revealing him to be not just a liar, but the prime suspect in the case. When confronted with this evidence, Henry's demeanor changed completely. The helpful, grieving witness transformed into an angry, defensive man whose story kept changing with each new piece of evidence. Finally, he admitted to being at Brandy's house on the day of the murders, but claimed he was there for consensual sexual encounter, not murder. This new story was as unbelievable as it was insulting to Brandy's memory. The evidence of her desperate fight for life, the defensive wounds on her hands, the blood trails showing her attempt to escape, all contradicted Henry's claim of a romantic encounter gone wrong. As the investigation continued, more disturbing details emerged about Henry's character and motivations. Cellmate testimony revealed that he confessed to the murders while in jail, describing in chilling detail how he had killed each victim. The financial motive became clear as investigators documented the mounting child support debt that Henry saw as an insurmountable problem requiring a permanent solution. The trial that followed was a media sensation, drawing national attention to the quiet college town of Tallahassee. The prosecution painted a picture of a selfish, violent man who chose murder over responsibility, who looked at his own son and saw only a financial burden to be eliminated. The defense attempted to shift blame to drug cartels and mysterious criminal organizations, theories that were thoroughly debunked by investigators. DNA evidence that initially seemed to support these alternative theories was ultimately ruled out, leaving Henry as the only viable suspect with both motive and opportunity. The first trial ended in a hung jury, a result that devastated the families and friends of the victims. The idea that 12 people could not unanimously agree on Henry's guilt despite overwhelming evidence was difficult to accept. But the legal system persevered, and a second trial was scheduled. In November 2019, nearly 9 years after the murders, justice finally came for Brandy, Tamaya, Tanaya, and Javante. Henry Segura was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some measure of closure to a community that had waited too long for justice. But the real tragedy extends far beyond the courtroom. 3 children who should have grown up, graduated from school, fallen in love, and had families of their own were instead reduced to evidence in a murder trial. Brandy Peters, who should have watched her children grow and celebrated their achievements, became instead a symbol of a mother's love and sacrifice. The ripple effects of this crime continue to spread through the Tallahassee community. Teachers who knew the twins still struggle with the loss. Neighbors have moved away, unable to live near the house where such evil occurred. Family members carry scars that will never fully heal. Perhaps most tragically, the crime robbed the world of immeasurable potential. We will never know what contributions Tamaya and Tanaya might have made to the world. We will never see Javante grow up and perhaps become the kind of man his father never was. We will never know what other lives Brandy might have touched with her gift for making people feel beautiful and loved. The house on Saddle Creek Run stands empty now, a memorial to lives cut short and dreams destroyed. But the memory of the Peters family lives on in the hearts of those who knew them, in the community that came together in their grief, and in the justice system that ultimately held their killer accountable. This is not just a story about murder. It is a story about the preciousness of family, the devastating cost of violence, and the long, difficult path to justice. It reminds us that evil can wear familiar faces, that the people we trust can sometimes be the ones who hurt us most deeply. But it is also a story about love triumphing over hate, about a community that refused to forget, and about a mother whose final act was not surrender but courage, fighting to the end to protect the children she loved more than life itself. In the end, Brandy Peters' legacy is not the manner of her death, but the way she lived, with fierce love for her children, with strength in the face of adversity, and with the kind of beauty that no amount of violence could ever truly destroy. Her children's legacy is the innocence they represented, the joy they brought to everyone who knew them, and a reminder that every child deserves protection, love, and a chance to grow up safe and secure. The case of the Tallahassee Bathtub murder stands as one of the most heartbreaking examples of domestic violence and its ultimate cost. It serves as a stark reminder that behind closed doors, in houses that look perfectly normal from the outside, unthinkable tragedies can unfold. It challenges us to be more aware of the signs of danger, more willing to intervene when we suspect someone is in trouble, and more committed to protecting the vulnerable members of our society. Justice may have been served, but the real victory would have been preventing this tragedy in the first place. The deaths of Brandy Peters and her 3 children serve as a permanent reminder that we must do better, be better, and never stop fighting to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Their story ends not in that blood-stained house in Tallahassee, but in the hearts of everyone who refuses to forget them, who tells their story, and who works to ensure that such preventable tragedies never happen again. In remembering them, in honoring their memory, we keep alive the love that defined their lives and the hope that their deaths were not in vain.